Welcome to Shark Games. For the past 2 years, I've been making games in Unity. It all started on April 26, 2021, when I turned 15 years old. Before this, I had dabbled in some programming, mainly making my own Minecraft plugins, as well as some game development. The main issue I had back then was that I had a really slow computer, which could barely handle Unity. So on my 15th birthday, my parents gave me a new computer, the M1 Mac Mini. The device was super fast and I still use it 2 years later. Today I decided to take a look at every game I've ever made and see what I've learned from it. My first game ever was made in about a week. It's a 2D platformer called Daily Walk. The premise of the game was that you go on your daily walk and find weird stuff happening. You can see that the graphics look pretty terrible. The games also had pretty bad controls and the collisions were terrible too. All of this made a game that was incredibly difficult to play, but I was still pretty proud of it at the time. I never released the game, however I did make 3 full levels, complete with enemies, unfair challenges and more. I'm really negative about it here, but like I said, I was very proud of it at the time, and without this game I would have probably never gotten any further in my game dev journey. After Daily Walk, I started working on a puzzle type game called Tech Support. You find an old, broken laptop and have to decipher the mysteries hidden on it. The game seemed like it had quite a bit of potential, but I found it really boring to work on after a while. On top of that, the puzzles weren't exactly puzzles. They mainly consisted of ciphers which needed to be decrypted using external tools. Looking back, I think the game could have actually worked if I had just put a deciphering tool in the game. I did learn quite a lot from it, however I never finished it. In the next couple of weeks I tried out a whole bunch of things. It started with a 2D top-down shooter game called Infestation. I made this game in 2 or 3 days and I was really proud of it. The game is incredibly simple, but I think it can actually be fun. The graphics are literally just built in Unity sprites, which made the enemies look like worms, which is why I called this game Infestation. Looking back, the enemy AI was programmed absolutely horrible, but it worked. There were also some design decisions which I made which I would have done differently today. You have to click every time you shoot, making it really exhausting to play. The score also goes up the longer you play, instead of the more enemies you kill. The music in this game was actually made by my older brother, which is pretty cool too. Infestation was the first game I released on itch.io and you can play it for free if you want. After this I made an arcade-like game called Crashing Down, where you have to defend the Earth against asteroids. I'd say this is a pretty fun game to play, even though it's very simple. It was also the first game I made which you could play using controller. After this I tried a whole bunch of things. I made a coin clicker game, which actually has a functional saving system. I also made a couple of games within 1 or 2 hours, which was a very fun challenge. I also made this fun simulation called The Simulation of Life. The final one of what I consider to be my first games was a game called Mr. Chaos. I took part in the Brackeys Game Jam with the team Let There Be Chaos. The game is a 3D first-person shooter where everything is destructible. I think this is actually a very fun game, but there are definitely some flaws with it, like the game's healing system. I think Mr. Chaos was very important because it was my first ever jam game and my first ever 3D game. During the second half of 2021 and the beginning of 2022, I took part in a lot of game jams. And I also did more short-time game challenges, like making a game in 30 minutes. I recreated one of my friends, Laserbot's, web games, but I made it a bit worse than the original. I also took part in the Vimlar Game Jam, in which I created Dungeon of the Wizard. This was a very simple top-down shooter, but I liked it a lot, so I kept working on the game every now and then after the jam was over. But I'll talk more about it a bit later on. Anyway, Dungeon of the Wizard was my first game that actually had levels, a final boss and an actual end. At least if you ignore Daily Walk, but I don't think that counts. In October of 2021, I took part in the Scream Jam and I made a horror game called Shadows in the Forest. This was my first horror game and my second 3D game. It was also the first time somebody did a playthrough of one of my games, which I thought was super cool. In 2022, I made a 2D platformer called Black or White. The game was pretty fun, but it was short and really basic. For some reason, I never actually released the game, which I might still do if you guys want it. I also created a game called Red Smash. Once again, I never released it, however I did make a devlog on it, which you shouldn't watch the devlog because it's very bad. I took part in the Scorespace Jam and I created Aliens, which was yet another arcade-like shooter game. This time I was actually pretty proud of the graphics, but the gameplay was very simplistic. I also released the definitive version of Dungeon of the Wizards, including way more levels than the original Jam version, as well as multiple bosses and a saving and loading system. I mainly have 2 issues with this game. The music I put in the background didn't really fit as well and also got very boring. The second issue I have with it is that you can manually select which level you want to play, which makes it kind of repetitive if you want to play a specific level or boss. I also added an achievement system, which I'm still pretty proud of. For the next couple of months I got very busy with school and had barely any time to work on making a game. I made a Snake remake, which I thought was pretty fun, and did a game jam where I made this clicker game in only 1 day. As the school year came to an end, I started working on a game which main focus was the graphic. I had been playing a lot of Hollow Knight and wanted to make a game which was also focused on Lost Kingdom. Ergo, I made a game called The Lost Kingdom. It's a walking simulator mainly focused on atmosphere and story, and it's pretty interesting to play. However, it was also quite boring to make after a while because of the lack of interesting gameplay. I then spent about a month or 2 on yet another top-down shooter. This was a roguelike blank game called Rogue Space. I thought it was pretty fun and I definitely made a lot of improvements compared to my previous top-down shooter, but it was essentially the same game concept once again. At the end of the... Okay guys, so as I'm editing my video right here, I realized that I actually made another game which I didn't cover here. So this here is a mobile game I made called Just Click It, and I made it in about 2 days plus another day to get it on the App Store, and I'm pretty bad at it here. You can play this game for free if you want with the link in the description. At the end of the summer, I took part in another Brackeys Game Jam, and I made a game called The Dark Moon. It was a very short but fun horror game set on, you guessed it, the dark side of the moon. After The Dark Moon, I made barely any games. I've created a small co-op racing game which is pretty fun, but I never really went through with it. Around December, I decided to get back at game dev once again. I made a Christmas game where you find Santa Claus, and in January I made a video on making a top-down shooter in 30 minutes, 1 hour and 3 hours. This was a lot of fun to do, and I might do more challenges like this in the future. It was also around this time that I decided to focus more on this YouTube channel, which had been kind of still up until this point. I also created a 2D sandbox game called Industrial Evolution. The game is quite a lot of fun in my opinion. It was my first building game and also the first time I collaborated with one of my friends to make a game. I made it together with LaserBot, the same guy whose game I recreated all those months ago. Industrial Evolution was the last game I fully completed. Since then I've been mainly focusing on school and making YouTube videos. However, I have been working on a new 2D platformer game, which I think is already way better than all of the games I made in the past. A new devlog for that will be going up very soon. So there you have it, 2 years of game dev. I know that it's not nearly as impressive as what other people have done, but I think I'm still very well on my way to create some fun experiences for the world to play. Like I said, I'm currently working on a new platformer, which I think will be my best game yet once I finish it. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, then please consider liking and subscribing since it really helps me out. Anyway, I'll see you guys in the next one.